Dustin, and welcome to episode 8 of the I Ching Cafe 101 series, where we focus on learning how to use and apply the I Ching. In this episode, I would like to ask the question, what makes a great I Ching question? So this is something I'm often asked. What do we ask of the I Ching? How do we frame it? What is out of bounds? And how do I know I've asked a great question? Okay, so let's unpack that. The first thing I want to share with you is that besides this is my perception, my way of working with the I Ching that I'm sharing with you, is that we could cast the coins without any question in mind. So that's on the one extreme. We could do that. We could just say, I'm not asking something specific. I'm not putting my thoughts into the I Ching. I'm just casting the coins and I'm going to work with whatever hexagram and changing lines come up, trusting that whatever you need to know most, whatever you're needing to pay attention to at the moment, irrespective of what area of life it may impact, the I Ching will answer that call. And you can do that, okay? You can do that. My view, if you are wanting to work with interpretation and really get into some detailed unpacking around the I Ching to make it a practical tool that you can apply, the more focused your questions, the better. So on the one hand, we have the one approach, ask no question. Just cast the coins or use the app and work with whatever comes out. Okay, that's great. If we want to work with a question, the more focused we can be in our question, the better. Okay, my view. So what does that mean? On one hand, it means that in sitting and working carefully with your question, in taking some time up front, in really crafting that question, getting it right, nailing it, we get a much clearer answer. So how do we know we've asked a great question of the I Ching? Because it becomes easier to interpret the answer and create connections and awareness because we have done that. That's my personal experience. When we really nail that question, when the answer comes back, when the hexagrams and the changing lines reflect back, we're like, oh, this is totally the issue. Okay. So that's one aspect, the focus. Take the time to focus that question, because in doing so, we also get out of the trap of obsessive compulsive behavior. Okay. What we want to do is we don't want to ask the I Ching 10 million times on the same issue over and over and over and over again. What we want to do is we want to ask the I Ching a question, get an answer, and then really work with the answer that comes back, really work with the flows of change that we're being asked to pay attention to. And so in taking that time with a question, we start already mitigating this risk of ask the question 10 million times from different angles because we don't want the answer the I Ching is giving us. Okay, we have all done it. Okay. So focus the question, take time on the question. The second piece of advice that my I Ching teacher gave me, which I find personally quite useful, and you can use it or don't use it as you see fit, is when you write your question, write yourself, if the question is about you, in the third person. So when I ask my questions, I say, please advise Belinda on blah, blah, blah. And I always start with, please advise. Please advise, because what we're wanting is advice. We are wanting wisdom. We are wanting insight. So that's my little thing, right? Please advise Belinda. Okay, put your name in there in the third person if you are asking your question for yourself. And what that does is a little psychological trick to it. It creates a little bit of a distance between you and your attachment to the answer and the question you asked. You know, if your name is there, please advise Belinda, suddenly you are now concerned and asking for insight about Belinda, okay? And that person is over there. And that's quite useful when we get into some of the interpretations and things just don't make sense, okay, which is quite normal. So put yourself in the third position. The next piece of advice I have for you is see if you can perhaps tighten up the question by putting a time frame around it. Okay, so if you ask the question, please advise me about my health. Your health today, your health in a year, your health at 90, What does that mean? What are you actually asking in that question? The same thing with a relationship, okay? How's my relationship going to unfold? Well, in 10 years' time, there might be very different challenges to face in your relationship than you might face over the next 3 months. What kind of time frame are you thinking about? So one way of really making your question more specific is to put a time binding around it, okay? Bring the time period down, okay? Find a way of asking a question relative to the time period that you're interested in, okay? It's a simple little trick that really can help tighten up our questions. And then there is the challenge of asking questions about others. This is a very interesting one and often comes up as an issue when we are asking questions about others in a potential love relationship or things like, is he or she cheating on me? These types of questions, okay, are very tricky because we are now potentially stepping over a boundary in trying to tap into somebody else's stuff, okay? I know it's really difficult to do, to hold ourselves back from that because we want to know, is he happy now with her? Is she happy now with him? Okay. I feel like I'm in an episode of Cheaters, okay. But really what it tells us is it tells us to not just ask questions that are focused, that are in the third person, where we are stepped back from the question, where we have tightened up with the time period, where we ask questions that have moral integrity, okay. Hear my words, okay? Moral integrity. We cannot change other people. All we can take responsibility is for ourselves. And so I encourage you, when you put your question down, think about, is this the highest and best question I could ask right now for the situation? Is there a question I could pose to myself that could help me be the better mate in the situation, or me be the better person, or me grow and fulfill the learning out of this experience that I could? I'm not saying don't ask those questions. I'm saying when you write them down, take a moment and ask yourself the question, is this the highest and best question that I can ask now that is going to help me grow and develop? And putting questions into the mix where we try to interrogate someone else's thoughts, someone else's framing, is that really helpful? Okay. And second of all, because you are not in their shoes, you are not in their life, you are not them, your ability to interpret the question becomes harder and harder to do. And all that does is create confusion. If you reframe the question and ask the question of something in yourself that you can develop, suddenly it becomes easier to see the connections between the question you've asked and the hexagrams and the changing lines. And then we can take action. We can transform and we can do better. The other part of asking a great I Ching question is to realize that really there's no question that's off limits. The I Ching is an extension of you. See it as a wise old mentor sitting next to you. And while you might feel embarrassed asking what you think is an inappropriate question of the I Ching, this is you. If you can't be honest with you, okay, there's other things we need to tackle. So there's no question that's off limits, from your sexuality to your finance, to your religious pursuits, to your hobbies and your work issues. There's nothing that is off limits because this is an extension of you. And you can ask questions of yourself on any topic, okay? So put that out there, okay? This is an extension of you. Ask yourself through the I Ching the questions you really want to know that are meaningful. And I do encourage you to ask questions that are meaningful. We can ask silly questions, okay? We have to take responsibility that the I Ching might give us silly answers back. And one example that I have in mind is that I ran a training course on the I Ching for a group of people. And the one lady in the group had been working with questions week after week after week, and you kind of start running out of questions to practice on, meaningful questions. So she thought, okay, well, I'm going on a date tonight. And her question was, should I wear that short skirt to my date? And she got hexagram 4, Youthful Folly, The Folly of Youth, don't be silly. Okay, and we had such a good laugh because the I Ching, in a way, had a huge sense of humor. It was her sense of humor pushing back on her on this question she had asked. But I want to be clear that there's no question that's off limits. This is your process. Lastly, I'd like to share with you the dilemma around asking yes-no questions. And the I Ching does not have one hexagram that says yes and another one that says no. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So when you write your questions, be careful of asking questions that are a yes-no question. All right, should I go and wear that mini skirt? All right, am I going to get my promotion? Because how do you work with what comes back? Frame your question on the situation, with a time period, with focus, and see if you can avoid a yes-no question. My I Ching teacher said sometimes yes-no questions give you locked hexagrams. And she had this little trick where she said, if you get a locked hexagram to a yes-no question, a good hexagram, okay, we're putting a little bit of judgment on there, will mean yes, but. A not so nice hexagram, okay, with judgment, will give us no because. All right, so if you do happen to ask a yes-no question and you get a locked hexagram, perhaps that might be useful to help you. A good hexagram, yes, but. A negative hexagram, no, because. Okay, and see how you work with that, if that works for you. So those might be some useful tips to work with the I Ching. When you cast your coins and you see what comes up and you work with your interpretation and keep following our tutorials and episodes as we go along so that you can keep on improving your ability to interpret, the magic really starts, the challenge really starts of applying what you've got to the question. My experience is that when the question's really clear, it becomes very quick to see how the hexagrams and the changing lines relate. Okay, the story makes sense. And it doesn't always make sense depending on how conscious we are of the issues that are at play and the development that we're going through. But on the whole, you'll look at that main hexagram that comes out and the I Ching is in no doubt about the issue it's talking about. Okay, so those are some tips to help you in asking great questions of the I Ching. Nothing is off limits because it is an extension of you. You are asking yourself these questions and you're using the tool to externalize the flows of change that you are going through and to reflect back in a mirror, a way of thinking about the situation that's not telling you what to do, but is telling you how you could potentially grow your consciousness because you're relating to the situation in a new, higher perspective. Thank you so much for joining me. Please, if you're new to the channel, all right, join us, subscribe or follow. There's a podcast version too. And if you like this and found usefulness in it, please like or share. And of course, come and join us for some of the hexagram episodes and the weekly and monthly episodes I do, taking us through the flows of change, weekly and monthly, and of course, once a year as well in our special episodes. I look forward to seeing you soon.